Hi guys, so this week we are talking about patterns, and a pattern is anything that repeats itself over and over and over. So I always give the example to my classes of, if I'm going to draw one race car on my paper, is that a pattern? No. If I drew 10 race cars in a line on my paper, would that be a pattern? Yeah. Right? Because we're repeating that race car over and over. So you can turn anything into a pattern as long as you're repeating that same thing over and over and over in your artwork. So this week we're going to be creating pattern in a really cool way, but you will need just to have some paint at home if you're going to do a technique like I'm doing right now. So if you do not have paint at home, that is okay, don't worry. You could also do this same thing with crayons, with markers, with colored pencils. Anything that you have on hand, you can just draw your patterns. But if you do happen to have some paint at home, we are going to be using that paint to stamp patterns onto our artwork this week. So the very first thing I did for this project was I took a piece of paper and I cut it into a shape. So I cut this one into a fish shape. I did this by folding my piece of paper in half, and then while it was still folded, I cut out a shape that I wanted. So you might have a grown-up draw a shape that you want. You might draw a shape that you want on your piece of paper first with a pencil, and then you can use scissors to cut that out. Now, you could just cut out like a heart or a star or something simple like that. It's totally up to you. But we do want you to practice using scissors this week. So try not to do this stamping on just like a square piece of paper. Be a little creative with the shape of your paper this week. So I did that fish. I also did this worm. On the worm, I went in, you can see it's the same color paper as my fish was, but I went in with some markers and I colored him before I started stamping in kind of a pattern. So a pattern is something that repeats. So my colors are a pattern too. So first I did purple, then I did red, then I did purple again, then I did red, then I did purple, then I did red. That's a pattern, right? So after you have the shape of your paper all cut out and you've done it safely, then you're going to go all around your home and you're going to find some different things that you would want to stamp in the paint. So these need to be things that you could either wash off really easily or that no one is using anymore. So you need to ask a grown-up's permission before you start dipping things from around your house in paint. We don't want to make anyone upset. So I found a couple of things around my classroom that I used to make this pattern on my worm right here. So the first one was a popsicle stick, and I love popsicle sticks because you can use the edge of them to make straight lines. You can use the point tip of it to make like little dots or little dashes. I also found an old marker cap from a marker that had dried out, and this is one of my favorite things to use in object printmaking because it's perfectly round. I don't need it anymore since the marker dried out, so that's what made these perfect little circles right here. I also found this old dice. Now, don't use a dice from like a game that your family plays together all the time because it does kind of ruin the dice a little bit. You can wash it and get some of the paint off, but it's always going to be on there a little bit. So I dipped this, and that's what made these perfect little squares. And you can even see in some of them, they have the holes that look like the little holes on the dice. I think that's pretty cool. The last thing that I found was a piece of cardboard, and the inside of cardboard, I don't know if you've ever looked at it, but it's kind of wavy and zigzaggy like this. So that's what I used to make these little stripy lines on his purple parts, okay? So once I have all of my objects gathered, I'm going to find something to put a little bit of paint on. This could be a plate, although you will need to wash off your plate really, really well. Very quickly after you do your art. If you're using like a plate from your kitchen, we don't want to leave any paint on there and get anyone sick. But some of my favorite things to use for paint palettes is like old pieces of cardboard. If you have any old boxes from celebrating the holidays with your family, I just ripped this right off a box lid, and I'm using that. And that way, when I'm done with my mess, I can just throw this away and I don't feel bad about it. Another thing that I always like to use at home as a paint palette is a piece of tin foil or a piece of parchment paper from your kitchen, because then you can just ball that right up and toss it in the trash. So I chose some black paint today, and I just put a little bit down on my cardboard so I have enough room to dip all of my objects in. You do not have to use black. You could use as many colors as you have, but you will need some sort of like liquid paint. If you try to use the paint that's in trays, that's not going to work. You need liquid paint, okay? So once I'm done with the with putting some liquid paint down on my palette, now I can get my objects and just start dipping them in the paint and then stamping them on my paper. Try to remember the order that you stamped things in and do it the same way all the way down. So keep in mind, patterns this week are anything that repeats itself. So if you do one mark and it's like kind of an oops, don't worry, you can make that into a pattern and do that over and over and over all the way down your artwork. We can't wait to see what you make this week. We hope that you had the best holiday season with your family, getting to spend some time at home and play. But we are so glad to have you back at school. We can't wait to see what types of patterns you come up with and what objects you can find from around your house. Be really creative and don't forget to ask permission. Have fun, you guys. Bye.